Okay, so imagine this. You've just spent hours on a huge mission-critical task.
Something really complex.
Right, like a surgical procedure. Or maybe you've just finished a massive data migration that an entire company depends on.
You're done. You breathe a sigh of relief.
And then you look down at the tool you were using, and you see it. It's flawed. A critical part is broken, damaged.
And that's when the panic sets in. The big question is, does that flaw, which you only found after you finished, go back in time and invalidate everything you just did?
Do you have to throw everything out because of this cloud of uncertainty about when the tool actually broke?
That is exactly the problem we are diving into today. It's this incredible piece of ancient jurisprudence from the Talmud in Tractate Chullin.
We're looking at pages 10a and 10b, all centered on the laws of ritual slaughter or shechita.
And our mission, really, is to see how the sages dealt with this kind of uncertainty. The whole thing starts when a ritual slaughterer finishes, but then the knife is found to be notched, pegum.
This forces us to really get into the difference between what's a certainty and what's just a concern, legally speaking.
And right away, the text just drops us into a major disagreement. Two completely opposite ways of looking at the problem.
Okay, so let's set up the specific case.
So a slaughterer makes the cut. Afterwards, the knife is checked and it has a notch.
And this is the key part, the slaughterer admits that after he finished the slaughter, but before he checked the knife.
He was using that same knife to break bones all day. So now the question is, what caused the notch? The slaughter or breaking the bones?
And the stakes are huge. If it was the slaughter, the animal's forbidden. If it was the bone breaking, it's perfectly fine. So first up is Rav Huna.
Rav Huna takes the hard line. He just says the slaughter is invalid. Pasul.
And his reasoning is all about fear.
It is. It's about concern. He says we have to be concerned, we have to fear that the notch happened during the slaughter.
When it hit like the tough hide on the neck or something.
Exactly. Since there's a doubt, and the animal started out as forbidden, we just revert back to that original status. Any doubt means it's not valid.
So for Rav Huna, if there's doubt, there is no deal. Simple as that. But then Rav Ḥisda comes in and says the complete opposite.
He says, no, the slaughter is valid. It's kasher.
How does he get there? The knife is clearly damaged.
Because Rav Ḥisda introduces this brilliant legal tool. It's all about certainty versus uncertainty.
Okay, walk us through that.
He says we attribute the notch to the one thing we know cause of notches, the bone breaking.
Why is that a certainty while the hide is an uncertainty?
Well, think about it physically. Smacking a knife against a hard bone is a known, definitive way to damage a blade. That is a certain cause.
Right.
But cutting the hide, it's just a possibility, a potential cause. It might notch the knife, but it usually doesn't, so it's uncertain.
So you have a certain explanation, the bone, that perfectly accounts for the notch.
Exactly. And Rav Ḥisda's whole argument rests on this legal maxim. And uncertainty does not override a certainty.
So we just say the bone did it, which means the knife was fine during the slaughter.
And the animal is valid.
That feels like a really solid, practical way to manage risk. But of course, it's not that simple. The logic immediately gets challenged by Rava.
This is what makes the Gemara so amazing. Rava pulls in a case from a totally different area of law that seems to just shatter Rav Ḥisda's whole principle.
He brings a ritual immersion, tevillah.
Right. And the law there is if a person immerses to become pure, but later they find something stuck to them.
Like a piece of glue or dough, right? An interposing item, a hiyah.
Exactly. If that's found, the immersion is invalid. They're still impure.
And Rava's point is, wait a minute.
The person's certainly immersed, that's the certainty, but it's uncertain if the piece of glue was on them during the immersion or if it got there after.
So here, the uncertainty does override the certainty.
It does. It's a direct contradiction to Rav Ḥisda's logic. So why are we lenient with the knife, but so strict with the person immersing?
That's a great question. How do they resolve that?
This is where they bring in another concept, halakha, or presumptive status. This is the key difference.
Okay, so halakha is like the legal default state of something.
It's the baseline. So in the immersion case, the person's baseline, their presumptive status, is one of impurity.
Okay.
So when the flaw, the interposing item is found, the rule is you just establish the person's status based on their original impurity. You say they must not have immersed properly. The doubt reinforces the baseline.
But wait, then shouldn't this same logic apply to the animal? Its presumptive status is that it's forbidden to eat before the slaughter.
It is.
So if there's a doubt about the knife, Shouldn't we just revert to its original forbidden status? That sounds like Rav Huna should win the whole argument.
And that is the logical knot that the Gemara has to untie.
So how does it?
It argues that the animal's presumptive status has been undermined. It's been changed by the act of slaughter itself.
Because the slaughtered animal is right there in front of you.
Exactly. The act was visibly performed, and, most of the time, slaughter is done correctly. So the baseline actually shifts from prohibited to presumptively permitted.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it all comes down to where the flaw is located.
Precisely. This is the central idea that makes it all click.
In the immersion case.
The flaw was found on the person. It's a flaw in the actual object being purified. The flaw lives on the presumptive status.
But in our case, with the slaughter.
The flaw developed in the knife, the tool, and the Gemara makes this very sharp distinction. A flaw did not develop in the animal.
So since the animal itself is sound, and the action was performed, it gets to keep its new presumptive status of being permitted.
That's the logic. And to prove that flaws in the animal really do invalidate things, they bring up another case.
This is the one about the windpipe and the gullet. The gargeray and the veshet.
Right. If the gullet was cut, but the windpipe was found to be displaced, and you don't know if it was displaced before or after the cut.
The animal is forbidden.
It is. And the sages give this big sweeping rule. In any case of uncertainty with regard to slaughter, the slaughter is not valid.
Which sounds exactly like Rav Huna's strict view from the beginning. So why doesn't that rule apply to our notched knife?
Because of the nature of the flaw.
Right.
The Gemara asks, what does any uncertainty actually refer to? And it lists things like interruption shechita or pressing the knife derasa.
Let's quickly define those. Shechita is
Interruption. It means you pause during the cut, you stop the continuous motion, and that invalidates the whole process. It's a flaw in the execution of the act itself.
and derasa.
That's pressing or hacking instead of smoothly slicing. It implies the knife wasn't sharp enough or the technique was wrong.
So both of those are flaws that develop in the animal during the cut.
Exactly. They're internal to the process. But the notched knife, that's a flaw that developed only in the tool. That's the line they draw. It's an external flaw.
Wow. It's a really elegant piece of legal architecture. You manage this retrospective judgment by separating the integrity of the object from the integrity of the tool.
Especially when you have a certain external cause you can blame for the tool's failure.
So let's see how this played out in the real world. There's this kind of chilling story about Rav Yosef.
Oh, yes. He faced this exact problem, but on a much larger scale.
He had slaughtered a whole series of animals, right? Not just one or two.
A lot. The text suggests maybe 13 animals, and only after the very last one did he check the knife and find the notch.
So what did he do?
He declared all 13 of them forbidden. Terafot.
13 animals. Yeah, that is a staggering loss. How could he possibly ban all of them?
Well, it's a really tough problem of attribution. If you follow Rav Huna, maybe ban the first one out of concern, but all of them.
And if you follow Rav Ḥisda, you'd want to blame it on a neck bone.
Right, but which neck bone? The first animals, the
Yeah.
7th, the 12th. You have no way of knowing.
It's an impossible forensic task to go back and pinpoint when the certain event happened across a series.
Exactly. The certainty principle kind of breaks down when it's diluted across time like that. And this incident shows why you need a practical safeguard.
Which brings us to the rule from Rav Kahana.
Rav Huna just made it a requirement. You have to examine the knife between each and every animal.
It's a process control.
It is. It prevents that cascading liability that Rav Yosef faced. You check after animal 1, it's good, that one is cleared. You isolate the risk to one animal at a time.
Okay, so after all this debate, Huna versus Ḥisda, the immersion problem, the tool versus the object, where does the law actually land? What's the final halakha?
The Gemara gives a very clear summary, and it all hinges on that bone.
The certain cause.
Right. So if the slaughterer did not break a bone with the knife afterward,
Meaning there's no certain explanation for the notch.
then the halakha follows Rav Huna. The slaughter is not valid because of the concern that the hide caused the damage.
But if the slaughterer did break a bone with it,
Then the halakha follows Rav Ḥisda. The slaughter is valid because we attribute the notch to the certain event of breaking the bone. The bone becomes the perfect legal scapegoat.
there's one last little detail here that I found fascinating. It steps away from pure law and into social practice. deference,
Yes, the idea that sometimes a Torah scholar's examination might be requested.
which is a stricter standard than what's technically required.
Rabbi Yonin explains that this is done only, and I'm quoting, due to the requirement to show deference to the sage.
That's amazing. The law itself says the slaughtherer's testimony is enough. One witness is fine for ritual matters.
But out of honor, out of respect for the gravity of the whole situation, a higher standard is sometimes imposed voluntarily. It just shows how social norms can shape practice beyond the letter of the law.
So we started with a simple notched knife and ended up with this really sophisticated system for managing legal presumption and attributing cause.
It really is.
I think the key takeaway for you, listening, is how a legal system has to grapple with uncertainty. And that crucial distinction of where the flaw lives in the tool or in the object itself can completely change how you judge something after the fact.
And what's really fascinating to me is that role of honor and deference in setting these higher operational standards. It raises a question for you to think about, really. In your own work, when you're navigating complex projects, how often do you impose stricter standards on yourself or on your team? Not because the rulebook requires it, but out of, a sense of respect for the outcome. Or just out of habit, even when the bare minimum might be legally or technically enough, something to mull over until our next deep dive.